guys, how's it going? HaloTheorist here, coming at you guys with my first podcast. I'm joined today by my good friend Alex. Please say hi, Alex.
Hey.
So today we're going to talk about one of the most generalized things I could think of. I want this introductory podcast to be something good, maybe something we know a lot about. So we're going to start today by talking about Master Chief, the Master Chief, Spartan Petty Officer John-117. And pretty much a lot of his backstory, his history, maybe how he is or who he is in Halo 1, 2, and 3, maybe compared to how he is in even games like 4 and 5. Because in my opinion, and I would like to say with the direction that 343 is going, he's much more of a different character, a verbal character. He has a lot more lines and he has a lot more to him. But before I do any of that, I'm actually going to give some backstory and maybe some explanation of why he is the way he is in Halo 1, 2, and 3, and maybe how he came to be. What I want to start by explaining is where Master Chief came from. Master Chief was born on Eridanos 2, which in the Halo universe is considered an outer colony. For those of you who don't know, the outer colonies are worlds that are farther away from Earth. A lot of the United Earth government, which is the governmental system that's in place prior to the UNSC and the attack of the Covenant with the Human Covenant War, is what's in place for a government prior to the UNSC militarizing them due to the necessity of how bad the war is with the Covenant. And from there, Master Chief is on Eridanos 2, and he's actually kidnapped at a very young age, at the age of 6, by ONI, or ONI, which is the Office of Naval Intelligence. Now, for those of you, again, who don't know, these guys are very, very shady and sneaky group of people. Throughout the Halo universe, you'll learn that they do some of the most immoral things that happen, but a lot of times their justification is for the betterment of humanity. So John, Officer 117, or John, again, as we know him, the Master Chief, is conscripted at age 6 at a very young age, also along with 75 other recruits, or 74 other recruits, I should say. These recruits are handpicked by an individual named Dr. Catherine Halsey. This individual is extremely smart, had a doctoral by the age of 12, and another doctoral prior to the conscription of the Spartans. In their training, they were trained relentlessly, even again at the age of 6, through pretty much a 24/7 boot camp on the planet called Reach, which is, yes, the same Reach from the video game Halo Reach. However, it's not the same events that are covered. On this planet, they're trained for a number of years, about 14 years prior to the first contact with the Covenant. Something that should be mentioned is that the Spartans themselves were not originally designed to fight the Covenant. They were actually made to help the United Earth government and their issue that they were having with people called insurrectionists. As I mentioned before, the outer colonies, which are farther away from Earth, were actually having issues due to the lack of resources and other fairness issues, I guess I should say, compared to the inner colonies in Earth. The neglection of the outer colonies was quite severe in some cases, and during the Human Covenant War, sparked some serious issues later that you see in games like Halo 4 and 5 due to what they feel like is the UNSC abandoning them when the Covenant attack. So with the Covenant attack and most of the Spartans actually dying during their training process, along with what's the severe part, which were the augmentations, where only 33 of the 75 Spartans actually survive, a few other stragglers being knocked off earlier, and a few others not necessarily dying, but needing to be rehabilitated just due to the severeness of these augmentations on kids. Now, to go back a little bit, a question that might be asked is, why would, one, you use kids? And Dr. Catherine Halsey actually provides an explanation for this, saying that children's minds are more easily adaptable to augmentations. And the severeness of these augmentations and what they are doing to kids, in order to make their bones as strong as metal and their minds as mentally strong as possible, that adults wouldn't be able to handle that. Their development is too far along the line and they're too grown. So as a result, kids are kidnapped. The following question would be then is, how do they get away with kidnapping kids? And something that should be mentioned here, that in the Halo universe around this time, ONI was capable of producing what are called flash clones. And flash clones are clones that are made that only survive about a year to 2 years. And these were actually made to replace the kids that were being kidnapped. So it would look like the kids who were kidnapped were then actually, had either a severe unknown issue, I guess a physical issue or an illness, that would have them pretty much be killed. And in the eyes of the parents, they would never know they wouldn't know the better. By the time 2 to 3 years passed, there were only a few Flash clones that luckily had somehow survived, even with their illnesses and issues that happen to them. Their bodies deteriorate, and there's actually a story from Halo Legends which goes a little bit deeper into it, with Spartans who weren't happy, or at least prior to them being Spartans, kids who weren't happy with the way that they were being treated, and some of their attempts to escape. What this will eventually lead into is the first contact, which is on the planet Harvest, where Chief, as well as a number of other Spartans who aren't actually on the planet when it happens, but near it, are given their armor, which is known as the Mjolnir armor, and this was the armor known as the Mark IV armor. This armor is somewhat iconic due to it being a piece of Mjolnir armor, which is designed by Catherine Halsey as well, and is somewhat of the second part to the Spartan program. It is the first part is the kids and their intense training, as well as their augmentations to make them super soldiers, and the second part was the Mjolnir armor. Now, in short, this armor is extremely expensive. It is almost as expensive as a starship in the Halo universe, and it was not weighted very lightly when first, I guess, proposed to Oni and the UNSC for reasoning to make it. Unbeknownst to a lot of the Spartans, the armor was originally very dangerous and was tested on people prior to the Spartans. However, they were not able to handle it due to these extreme magnification. The Spartan armor itself is actually linked neurologically to the brain of the wearer and amplifies their movements once they start. This results in individuals who aren't able to handle the movement having sort of a spaz reaction to it and having pretty much the armor crush them within it, which is sort of kind of like being squished in a trash compactor that is pretty much amplifying every spaz that you're having as you are having it. This being said, the only individuals capable of wearing Mjolnir armor are Spartans due to their genetic enhancements. But leading up to that, Chief is then early on teamed up with a few other people which are known in the squad as Blue Team. This consists of the Master Chief, John-117, Linda, Kelly, and Fred 104. They together throughout the Halo timeline complete more missions than any other members of the UNSC together, and become widely known as one of the greatest Spartan teams pretty much to exist up to the point of Halo 5 and where we're at now. Chief spends an extensive amount of time with Blue Team, and their bond becomes very close together, which you kind of is explained in Halo 5 with when Cortana is reintroduced, because they had never met her before. But as a quick sum up, that's pretty much all there is with Chief and how he is. But today what we want to talk about is Chief's development in Halo 1, 2, and 3, and 4, 5, and 6. So I'll hand it over to Alex here for a minute and just have him talk about, and we'll discuss how does Chief somewhat change throughout the Halo games from even his history into 1, 2, and 3, and then how does he maybe change again as it switches, the game switches developers into 3, 4, 3, as well as Halo 4 and 5. So Alex, tell me, what do you think about Chief in Halo 1, 2, and 3? What kind of person is he like? What kind of character? What was Bungie going for?
Okay, well, it should be noted that he is a little bit different in those games than he is in the books, which is kind of what you were referring to. There's a whole lot to go in there, but that's not what we're going to do here today. In the first three games, he's very simple. He's very stoic for the most part. Any lines he has are like cool lines. He has a cool voice. He's very calm, composed, and he is very, very simple. He's more akin to a character like Doom Guy in the Doom series, who shoots first, asks questions never. Kind of like,
exactly.
yeah. If this is very, very, very much apparent with various actions that he takes in all the first three games. An example in Halo 1 is when when Master Chief and Cortana first go and they find the control room on the Halo ring. I guess before, actually no, I screwed up the order there. So basically, Chief finds Guilty Spark, and he doesn't really ask him a lot of questions about the Halo ring. Because Guilty Spark tells him that it's, I believe he tells him that it's like a weapon, but he doesn't ask any specifications. He just thinks, oh, it's a weapon that'll kill the Covenant. He has very, very simple view on things, and so it takes someone like Cortana who really balances him out. Because Chief is the muscle and Cortana is the brains, and or like the brains and the brawn is a better way of saying it. And
Yeah,
basically,
Cortana kind of like guides him, and Chief kind of is point and shoot type, and say the badass line, almost like Terminator. And
yeah, kind of.
Cortana's more like, yeah, behind the curtain, doing all the works, pointing him in the right direction.
That's true. Now, when it comes to Master Chief, a perfect example, I guess I aside from that line that I listed in Halo 1 is another example in Halo 3 when he actually has to rescue Cortana, which is a nice reversal from how things were in the first games, or in Halo 1 and Halo 2 rather. And what he says is, I try shooting my way out and mix things up a little. This just further shows his very simple, gung-ho, very stoic, determined, calm, collected personality. There's never a moment in the first 3 Halo games where Master Chief is uncertain of himself, and he's always comfortable with what he's doing when he's with Cortana. And this and his story, he doesn't have much of a story arc necessarily, at least like an emotional one, like he does in Halo 4. But
Hmm.
his character, like I said before, just very, very simple, badass, to the point. He's very, very, very much like Doom Guy, more or less. The Bungie developers
Yeah, I mean,
even said that he was supposed to be a blank slate for the player to inhabit and make the player feel empowered while they are playing as him.
no, and yeah, they definitely feel empowered. I mean, I know a lot of Halo fans that regard the first 3 games as like a kind of like the Star Wars series, where they're just they're I would say like they're untouchable. Every game does have its critiques and whatnot. What could be made better? I guess, yeah, made better about it. A lot of people liking Halo Reach and all. But for the story wise, for Master Chief, Halo 1, 2, and 3 are regarded as very high, and I feel that just on the developmental side of things, that Chief didn't really have a lot to go off of in Halo 1. They obviously, it was the first game, but they didn't really try to make him into anything too crazy. Like you're saying, he's a blank slate. He's just someone for the player to inhabit and to explore the Halo universe in, and to go through the steps. But I also feel like they did kind of maintain a pretty good story with Chief, and that by the end of Halo 3, there is a difference between him. He is regarded rather as an individual character, and a lot less like how you would maybe say like Noble Six is in Halo Reach, where they've hidden so much information about him just to preserve his ability to be inhabited by the player, to be, I guess, identified with similar to the player. Uh, Really, what I would say from there then is that Chief's relationship with Cortana is even somewhat touched on in Halo 1, 2, and 3. So while I feel like, as you said, there's nowhere near as the same level of relationship that Chief has with Cortana in Halo 4 and Halo 5, I guess just due to the direction that 343 decided to go with it, I still feel like he's a character. I mean, in Halo 2, the lines of dialogue he has, while I would say mostly in the cutscenes, is still Jurassic, way more than they were in Halo CE.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. If a simple summary of the Bungie games is that there is definitely a story, but the main focus is to have badass moments, and just it's a super fun, simple story that's really badass and has a ton of cool character one-liners and things like that. And 343, as we'll talk about a little later, takes a slightly different approach and really tries to flesh out Master Chief as a character emotionally, and putting him in different challenges than he was in Halos 1 to 3. And I'm
Hmm.
pretty sure you know a
Well,
lot more about the background lore of Halos 1 to 3 than I do, so I'm going to turn that over to you now.
mhm. Well, I would ask really quick, just to ask, what would you say about, I guess, Master Chief with this character being flushed out like that? I mean, a lot of people regard Halo 1, 2, and 3 as great because they kind of said that Master Chief became too complicated in Halo 4 and 5, and that a lot of people didn't like the direction that 343 took with Halo 4. But funny enough, Halo 5 is literally, if you watch the Halo 3 Essentials and the commentary on that disc of Halo 1 and 2 and the cutscenes, is the exact plot that they were going to have for Halo 1, with Cortana being, I guess, riddled with power. He becomes overwhelmed with power and wants to take over the universe.
Yeah.
But rather, they chose to go with the way that they went instead, and as a result, it's what we know now rather than what we know, with what could have been. And so, had they gone that route, it would have been a much different game. But even with Halo 3, the legendary ending of Halo 3 shows the Forward Unto Dawn, the ship that is cut in half by the front by the portal that led back to Earth, and the back, which was the explosion of the Ark, drifting towards a planet. So sometimes I find it not necessarily hard to believe that Bungie did not have somewhere to go with Chief and his story.
Yeah.
But yes, it was the end of that story arc, that character trilogy between Chief and Cortana, and even the Arbiter and other important characters that develop. But Halo 1 was extremely simple. And by the time we get to Halo 4, I mean, just like with any series, a lot of complicated things, a lot of moving parts are involved. And to try to pick that up, I do have a respect for 343, especially with Halo 4. Personally, I enjoyed it a lot. I enjoyed the where they were going with Chief, and I felt like that is where he was supposed to go. Now with Halo 5, again, every game does have its advantages, disadvantages, and critique that it can be done with it. But I don't treat Halo 5 necessarily as the same. But with Halo 4, Chief is really where I believe he should have been. He still has a fair amount of good lines, but at the end of it, we really do see Chief going through this new transition. And I feel like the whole game transitioned him very well from, as you were saying, the Doom guy sort of mentality that he has in 1, 2, and 3, where he's a very point-and-shoot type character doing, incredibly badass things, but a lot more of his humanity being fleshed out in the books or extended lore. So moving into Halo 4 and 5, I mean, what was it about those games? Because you've let me know before that's your favorite game is Halo 4.
Yeah, definitely.
And when it came out, I liked it a lot as well. What about that makes it your favorite game? What about it with Chief and everything makes it your favorite game?
Okay, well, I mean, for me, in the Halo series, story has always been a huge part for me. I mean, I love the multiplayer. I love every part of the game, but for me, story has always been one of the biggest things, and I love to death Halo 4's story because, well, I do love the very simple, straight to the point, badass, space adventure, space opera, whatever you want to call it, type story. I love how you're finally seeing what Master Chief's kind of insane life, because I mean, let's be real. It's not normal to become a child super soldier and then spend your entire life fighting aliens, and it is gonna have a psychological
and prior to that game,
on
they
you.
don't even really they don't talk about it very much. I mean, there's like the grunt at the end of Halo 3, where if you're playing that level, you can actually see this grunt talk to you, and he kind of says that. But with in-game lore, there's not a lot of show and tell really about Master Chief's life and everything. All of it is kind of hidden within the extended lore in the books. So by the time Halo 4 comes around, I feel like they did a good job incorporating that into the game. That's what had happened, and while they didn't kind of just explain all of it outright, they did make it prevalent in the game.
Yeah, I can agree. I guess, like, to put it quite simply, I know that I loved Halo 4 because I love watching emotional journeys for characters, especially for characters that are shown to be like in a in a rather simple. I don't mean simple in a negative way. And just, I guess, a rather simple, straightforward to the point, Terminator, badass, fighter kind of way. It was very interesting just to see how Master Chief would react to situations that he's uncomfortable with. And it's also kind of amazing and extremely heartbreaking in the best way possible. At the end of Halo 4, when Cortana ends up, unfortunately, well, I mean, for that time anyway, being dead, and you can just see Master Chief's complete and utter devastation, because for the first time in the whole series, you hear his voice. It sounds strained. It sounds weak. He slumps his shoulders, and everything in the world is literally symbolic. His world is literally, you know, falling around him, which is supposed to be
Yeah,
symbolic
like
of him
literally
basically
and
losing every.
symbolically. I mean, if
Yeah.
you yeah, if you analyze that end scene, it's definitely very symbolic. It's very there's a lot of allusions drawn that can be drawn from that scene to Master Chief's current situation. And I mean, I feel that that is where that should have went. I mean, there's with Halo 4 stories, I was saying before, everything about 1, 2, and 3 kind of led to where Halo 4 was. And I kind of don't understand where people are drawing this disconnect between Halo 1, 2, and 3 and Halo 4. I
I
mean,
think I might know
if,
where it
like, this,
is.
that, yeah.
So
Okay, yeah,
I
by all
think
means.
so with Halo 4. Now, I could understand people want it to be a sequel to Halo 3, and in many respects, you could argue that it's not a sequel to Halo 3. Being in tone, it's very different, obviously. I mean, in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
and also, it's not just in tone, also another disconnect, which I don't think we're going to get into too much today. But for many people, the sudden art style change, how Master Chief looks different, everything looks different at the start of Halo 4, and it's not necessarily given, at least in game to many players, a completely clear explanation as to why everything is so different. And I think that maybe the jump from Halo 3 to 4 may have been slightly too much for some players. And also, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if you were to compare the games story wise and tonally speaking, they're very different, and I think people have a very, which is understandable. I have a personal connection to my favorite Halo games, obviously as well. That the transition basically between Halo 3 and 4, it wasn't, even though I love Halo 4, it's my favorite game. It wasn't a subtle transition necessarily. It was very abrupt, and it was very different emotionally and tonally. And I don't think that many people necessarily wanted to have like a emotional slow. Well, I don't know if I want to say slow. Basically, I don't think many people wanted to have a very emotional, um, emotionally charged, character-driven story, especially for a character like Master Chief, who up to this point they had maybe seen as like, kind of like Doom Guy. He's supposed to be cool, badass, composed, always knows what he
Yeah,
has
he's
to
not
do and
supposed
what
to
he
lose
wants
his
to do. Yeah,
yeah. I say he's not supposed to lose his composure. So I can really see where you're coming from in that sense. Master Chief is idolized. Master Chief is, I mean, he is the chief. Like even humanity in lore, he is just regarded as this, this just as I'm gonna say this ultimate warrior that can't be phased by anything. That's clearly how he's described in pretty much every piece of Halo lore prior to probably Halo 5 and maybe a few of the books and whatnot. Even in the books, they don't really allude to him being anywhere near as I would say, emotional as you see at the end of Halo 4, which still isn't a lot. I mean, that is a main focus point about Halo 4 is, that his human qualities need to be brought out, that
yeah.
the relationship between him and Cortana is that he should be the human and she should be the
Um,
machine,
uh,
which as we've actually had the conversation before is quite backwards of what's going on, where Chief is a human and acts more like a machine, and Cortana is considered a machine, beings that she's AI and all, and that yes, she is generated from living tissue and acts like a human, but still it is created while Master Chief is born. And it's funny how they act like the opposite of what they are
yeah.
and are trying to help each other become more of what the other is supposed
I
to
think a
be.
perfect scene
Yeah.
to demonstrate that would be there's this is kind of this is probably one of my favorite scenes in all of Halo 4. We talked about this a stupid amount. It was that scene where Master Chief and Cortana, they're both in the Infinity getting ready to, well, after Del Rio basically says we're not going to help you beat all the Forerunners and everything. Basically, when they're about to leave the Infinity to go and fight the Forerunners, Cortana's base is telling Chief all the reasons why she knows the sun isn't real, and then Master Chief. It's clear that how by the way she's talking to him and what she's saying, that she is kind of she's trying to, I think, look for some sort of comfort or get Chief to open up in some sort of way, and Chief is just sitting there fiddling with his assault rifle. And this shows perfectly how Cortana is being emotionally open, and Chief is uncomfortable with being emotionally open. He's uncomfortable with dealing with these sorts of things. So all he does what he knows how to really do, which is like fiddle with his weapon. You said that was a thing that he did in the books, I believe. Like when he was uncomfortable, he
Yeah,
would fiddle
so
with his weapon.
that's a nervous tendency that Chief has in the books that's mentioned, and funny enough, with how Cortana is, I guess, like interlinked with Chief. For those of you who don't know, Chief has neural implants of which Cortana can pretty much almost know what he's thinking. I mean, she is very closely connected to him, and his thoughts are not as private as yours and mine, where I can, no matter what I'm thinking, I can hold back. I can make you believe something else. Cortana has like a very close monitor on Chief, so to speak, and knows when things are going on. So in that moment, it's a very kind of subtle nod to real detail that I applaud 343 for having, because they took something that very few players would know, which is that Chief, in his nervous tendency, fiddles with his weapon. He messes with his weapon and his guns in order to avoid having to be open about his feelings and whatnot, and explain. And many Spartans do those same things. However, it is purely alluded that Chief does that in particular. And with that, again, I applaud 343 for having that kind of attention to detail and putting it in that cutscene. That cutscene is the introduction to, I believe, the level Shutdown in Halo 4.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
And, but yeah, then like you had said, they were going to chase the Didact, and Chief, knowing what's best, somewhat still having his Halo 1, 2, and 3 mentality and attitude of, not really not gonna say not caring, but knowing that he's right, having confidence in his decisions and ability, and at the same time also just displaying a new side of Chief that hasn't been necessarily explored yet, and has only been somewhat left in the books. I feel that a relationship with Cortana was the perfect way to flush that kind of relationship out. I mean, the relationship that Chief has with Arbiter, yeah, as mentioned in Halo 5, I would say the Arbiter, and even as an elite of Sangheili, has more of an emotional connection between them than Chief does. Chief views him as an ally, and someone that I would say that he can trust, or that he knows has his back, but nowhere near on like the level of Cortana, someone who feeds him information, knows his internal thoughts and his feelings, despite whether he knows what they are or not.
That's true. I just want to say one last thing about
Yep,
that scene, and then that's it. Something that this is something you brought up to me, is that that scene where he's talking with Cortana and fiddling with his assault rifle. There are two ways you could have interpreted that scene. As like someone who doesn't really know much of the expanded lore, you could just interpret it as a normal, typical scene between Chief and Cortana. But if you're someone who knows some of the expanded lore, i.e. the books or comics or whatever you want to think of, you will notice the more subtle details and nuances that 343 put in that scene. So I think that's like, it was an amazing way to appeal to both kinds of fans, because there's just simply two ways you could have interpreted the scene. But anyway, yeah, I just really wanted to say.
No,
that 'cause
yeah,
I
I
think
agree.
it's
And as I was saying, I feel like it really gives a nod. I don't want to just applaud 343 for everything here. Don't get me wrong. They have made a fair share of what I believe to be discrepancies in what I believe should happen. And again, that's my own personal opinion, but my opinion also is shared that they did a great job there, because as you're saying, they could be interpreted entirely just at surface level for players who don't know, and then very in depth as well for players who are fluent with a lot of the Halo lore and a lot of the things that happen. And to miss that, or not to miss it, but to see it, sort of shows a whole new level of the Halo universe, which I love to talk about, with individuals, including yourself. I mean, I could talk about Halo all day long, and Chief being one of the most interesting things that you can look to and examine. I mean, he has 5 games of which he's in, and everything he does in those games, every line could be looked at and examined and picked apart to just see how he is and who he is at each point in time. And that's what I really hope to accomplish with this podcast today to just show the kind of progression that Chief has had even since he was originally incorporated into the Spartan program and conscripted. I mean, even from a young age, Chief was in Halo 1, 2, and 3 was very just he knew exactly what to do. He was a leader, and he's always been the leader of the Spartans. He's always had his composure, and he's always had this this I would say this warrior mentality of just unrelenting force that hashtag Skyrim reference, unrelenting force that he that nothing can beat him, and that he is unbreakable.
That's true.
And to then later now show that there is something that can break him, I guess, I would say in some people's view can break his character, which is that's like the opposite of my view, where I'm like, oh no, they're bringing out more of his character. They're like, no, that's not Chief.
That's understandable.
That's not the Master Chief. I know that's not the Cortana.
I understand
Yeah.
why people don't want him to change. I mean, I think it's okay for him to change and for you to see more sides of him, but I really do understand why people wouldn't want him to change, because I mean, if you were to take someone like Doom Guy and then have like a story where you really get to see Doom Guy, I don't know, go through some sort of emotional journey. I mean, I'll be honest, that would be a little bit weird. I mean, it could potentially work, but I would definitely not suggest the idea.
Yeah, I don't
myself.
think it would appeal to a lot of people. Yeah,
Yeah,
it would very
appeal,
much so break his character.
Yeah, it wouldn't appeal to me. I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't want them to necessarily take risks, but I think that's the mentality that a good amount of the of like the people who prefer the Bungie games more over the 343 games, at least in terms of story. I think that's kind of how they saw the decision that 343 made to explore more of Master Chief emotionally as a person. But anyway, we've talked to death about Halo 4. Do you want to talk about Halo 5 story at all, or do you just want to get to like some?
No, yeah, I mean, Halo 5 is kind of a lot of people, even the 343 fans, are kind of like what happened with Halo 5, and I think it's funny that you mentioned the taking risks. That you would like 343 to take some risks, and with Halo 2, like as with the Arbiter and the Arbiter levels, I mean, Bungie felt like they were taking a huge risk, and I personally remember when Halo 2 came out and the conflict that some people had just with the Arbiter and the Arbiter levels and them not liking it. Meanwhile, I regarded them as absolutely great. I loved the Arbiter levels. I mean, they were like that, and it was a huge risk. And in the eyes of some of the Bungie developers, they saw it as something that paid off. That they were able to explore more of the Covenant side of things, and that they were able to tell somewhat of a different story. So going to Halo 5 with that now, I really wish that 343 had gone along with the Hunt the Truth series. And I don't know if you listened to the Hunt the Truth audio, but for those of you who haven't, I extremely recommend listening to that, because that was some of the best, I guess, expanded lore that I've ever, I would say seen, but it's actually heard. It's all audio files from any piece of Halo lore. I mean, short of maybe some of the books like Ghosts of Onyx and Halo First Strike, it was definitely one of the best things I've seen, and it very much so questioned Chief's character and made you somewhat believe that maybe there was a reason why Chief was committing the actions he was committing in game, and I believe would have been a great leeway to what the early Halo 5 trailers were showing us, where Chief was supposed to possibly be a traitor, and his character was in question with what had happened to him. However, that risk wasn't necessarily made, and as a result, Halo 5's story became, I believe, what it is.
Yeah, Halo 5's
which is
story,
somewhat all over the place. Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. I think, now, I could be wrong on this, but I remember reading some things about Halo 5's story development having it was rather chaotic and had a fair amount of rewrites. And when a story has to undergo such dramatic changes, I think that can definitely result in the story not necessarily being of the quality that the writers intended it to be, or the developers intended it to be.
Yeah, the original intention.
Yeah. Now, that's not to excuse Halo 5's story, because there are issues with it, aside from just, you could argue, misleading marketing. Another interesting case of misleading marketing that I think a good amount of people forget about is with Halo 2. I actually think of Halo 2 and Halo 5 as having very similar problems, and obviously
Yeah, it's the
they are
exact
very different.
illusion I was going to draw. The connection. They're very different in the sense of where Chief is at in those games, and keeping along with the podcast, Chief and what he does in those games. I mean, in Halo 2, Chief is he is there for a lot of the levels, a lot more than Halo 5 is. That's one of the big complaints that they have about Halo 5, where Chief is not there, and that we only play a few missions as Chief.
That's definitely true.
So again, yeah, where does that I guess where do you draw the line on that? Where it's a mainline Halo game, just like Halo 2 is. However, we play a number of missions in Halo 2 as the Arbiter,
Yeah, kind of
and
like how you in Halo
I would
5
just
is
kind of like
locked.
to, yeah, and yeah, just like how you play in Halo 5 as Locke. However, Chief just doesn't really go through any of that emotional change like he was in Halo 4. He wasn't, I guess, questioned on his morality, maybe as a traitor, or where his allegiance lies, or even a lot of maybe his I would say sanity with after what happened with Cortana at the end of Halo 4.
Yeah, I think Halo
Chief
5
just
story had a
kind of
lot of
seems very
potential though.
driven.
Like I
I know,
think
I definitely agree. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, now I know that it's very easy, and I understand, and honestly my biases make me partly agree that bringing Cortana back, after her death, her sad death in Halo 4 could like completely undermine the purpose of Halo 4, but I don't think it necessarily undoes his emotional journey, and I think that if they had just written it a little better, then Chief's reunification of Cortana only for her to betray him could have been emotionally gut-wrenching. I just think, given the way the story was written and how few missions you get with the Chief, and the fact that you are literally revealed that Cortana is still alive through a flashback. Well, I mean, I guess not necessarily the flashback, but through the radio. That they could have. I think that the way
Yeah,
they
through
did it
through
was
the
bad,
domain.
but the
Yeah.
idea wasn't necessarily bad. It's
I
kind
yeah,
of a
and I believe
complicated
that would have
situation.
been it would have been great to have Chief, in the last few levels do everything that Halo 5 had. Had they condensed the game down and focused on the Hunt the Truth, and Chief, being somewhat not insane so to speak, but unstable with what had happened in Halo 4, being the first half of the game with Locke, i.e., like how he is with the Arbiter in Halo 2, chasing him throughout the game and questioning, some of the actions that Chief is committing, in game, to then at the end of the game have Chief meet Cortana and have the vision and do everything that happens would have been such a different game. Would have been a much different emotional change for Chief, and probably better accurately represented what he was going through and why he was doing the actions that he was. I mean, at the beginning of Halo 5, I mean, Chief just instantly decides to go AWOL, and do that. I mean, he pretty much with no, I'm not gonna say rhyme or reason, but with no real support of why he's doing it, other than Cortana's been with him for that long. He just immediately chooses to make the decision. He kind of loses his composure, so to speak, but at the same time doesn't. He just makes a decision and says, "This is what I'm doing." And I find it just very, very odd and very different, even for a broken Chief. And is what I think that they're somewhat changing in Halo Infinite.
Yeah.
I.e., looking at the Halo Infinite trailer.
Yeah. Do you want to? What do you think is gonna, I guess, happen in Halo Infinite? Like, what direct? Because after Halo 5's less than stellar reception to its story, as well as the initially Halo 4's not so great reception, because it's kind of funny. Halo 4 over time, it seems that people became a little more accepting of it, but Halo 5 story, maybe, who knows, maybe the same thing will happen with Halo 5's, you never know, but after the not so stellar reaction, or positive reaction I should say, to Halo 5 story, what do you think that they are going to try and do with the story in Halo Infinite? And obviously we're not, this part is mostly just speculation. We don't necessarily know entirely what's going to happen.
No, right. I definitely agree. Going to, I guess, kind of shameless plug here to my most recent YouTube video with Chief's reconciliation with Cortana. I definitely believe that now Chief has a different mentality against Cortana. Even at the end of Halo 5, Chief is a little bit more open and I guess, willing to accept the fact that maybe his approach isn't the right approach to what's going on and how to deal with Cortana. And I believe that there could be a possibility that, there's as we've heard in the secret audio of the Halo 5 trailer, the Discover Hope trailer, that there could be a second Cortana made. And that might somehow help psychologically with Chief and his loss and combating the original Cortana. In one of the cutscenes of Halo 4, and I mentioned in the video, Cortana definitely believes that Dr. Halsey can make another version of her. And as we see in the Discover Hope trailer, we see an AI chip that is designated CTN0453-0, which is only one number off of Cortana's current serial number, which is CTN0452-9. So, I mean, the possibilities there definitely exist, and I think that Chief is going to have a different mentality against Cortana and how he needs to handle her in the situation with her. I believe he's more well put together now after this time. As we know, there's kind of an extended period of time between the two games, and I would like to really see where Chief lies when he meets Cortana. What situations are going to be surrounding their reconciliation, and how maybe can it be how can their bond be recovered, or how is it going to end? Cortana and Chief have done a lot for each other, and in Halo 4, one of the last few lines, they talk about, they were supposed to take care of each other. They were supposed to do that, and Chief in Halo 5, is attempting, I guess, to fulfill his job that he had originally promised and sees a second chance. And maybe that's why he acts the way that he does in Halo 5. That's why he starts with those actions.
That's true.
Knows by Halo Infinite that that's not the way that he can go about it. Cortana has to be willing to either help herself, which he was unable to get through to her, even so much so as making himself vulnerable, possibly being locked in a cryptum for thousands and thousands of years. So now he's taking a much different approach and is a little bit more stern, I would say, and a little bit more headstrong against the idea that Cortana is the same. He definitely knows now that she needs to be stopped, and seems to have some sort of plan or mentality that is better toned, or I guess better tuned to dealing with her. It's not just so much so as only he can necessarily help her. Because that's how I feel that in Halo 5 it barely came across.
I'm honestly really curious about what kind of story they're going to tell. Like I wonder, because with Halo 4 and 5, obviously they're very different tonally speaking from the original Bungie games. So I wonder, because I know that the guy, the creative director, or at least I think his name was Chris something, he said that and also other 343 devs have said that the game is supposed to be a soft reboot, I believe is their exact words, for the Halo series. So I wonder if this next game is going to be more of an emotional journey for Master Chief, or if maybe they just kind of want to try and make the game more like how the Bungie developers made it, where it's more of a power fantasy, it's more of a fun, fast-paced, action adventure type thing, instead of an more of an emotional journey like Halo 4.
Halo defined what first-person shooters are like, and what sci-fi space opera is supposed to look like. Because I mean that really is what it is. It's sci-fi space opera, and there are games like Mass Effect and other ones that kind of also accurately represent that kind of story, where you're running around the galaxy and you're shooting aliens and you're kicking ass and you're supposed to be having a good time, and that a good story can still be written within that while maintaining the attributes and characteristics of certain individuals within the universe. So I guess in opposition, like you're saying, to my point, where I feel like he is going to be a little bit more stern towards it, maybe now he is just going to, like you said, it's a soft reboot. He is going to just become the same individual like he was back in Halo 1, 2, and 3, and just take the actions needed in the most badass way that 343 can make him I guess do those actions, and at the same time still keep I would say, the storyline going. I guess have it make sense from a lore perspective, which I would credit, deeply if they are able to complete all of that all in one go.
Yeah,
So I guess let's just last little finish up. What do you think about that?
I definitely agree with what you're saying. That would be cool, I guess, from, like you said, a lore perspective, and just to see, it would be cool to see him be badass and stuff again. However, I mean, this is my, obviously, what I personally hope to happen, and it doesn't have to be what I want in order for it to be great. Um, I mean, I would love to see almost like it can be more fast paced, a more action adventure type story like the original Bungie games were. However, I don't want them to just necessarily throw the baby out with the bathwater and just completely forget about Master Chief's emotional journey, because I still think that there is a lot of potential for very emotional character moments in Halo Infinite if they stick even a little bit to the to what they were kind of setting up in Halo 4, and also at the beginning of Halo 5 to an extent as well. So I don't know. My hopes is that it's an emotional but also really fun story. I think they definitely have the potential to make it that way. They seem to understand more and more. Like, it seems that the more that 343 makes Halo, the more they seem to understand how to make certain parts of it better. Like, I think honestly, kind of like how the Bungie games, the more they worked, the better they seem to get their footing. Because even the Bungie developers admit, I highly recommend you guys watch the developer commentaries for the campaigns. Even the Bungie developers admit like certain flaws that they had with the Halo 1 and 2 campaigns. It's very interesting. So I really, really, really hope that 343 is able to make the best possible Halo game of their trilogy at the very least, in Halo Infinite. I think that would be a really, really, really cool, I don't know, next installment in the series.
Yeah, I think that having that, maybe even possibly with the end of Master Chief, in his story arc and as his character would be, if they were able to nail that, would kind of give him a good resting spot. Unlike maybe where, at least I personally feel like Chief was sitting at the end of Halo 3, where we believe that the Covenant and the Flood were gone, but clearly there was a legendary ending, and there was still so much unknown about the Forerunners.
That's true.
So now with all of that filled, it would be nice to possibly see all of that come together and then finally be finished. But I just want to say thanks, Alex, for talking to me. Again, I love talking about Halo stuff. Hopefully, we'll have some podcasts here in the future that we can continue talking about
hell yeah, that'd be
really
so much
nice
fun.
topics like this. Yeah, and if you guys want to, just so you know, we post a video every Wednesday on SoundCloud and YouTube with this podcast. So please feel free to tune in. I'll leave a link to the SoundCloud in the description below. We also do custom game nights. I'll leave a link to my Instagram below so you guys can see when those are. And thank you guys for listening. I hope you have a great time.